So Peter, when did you decide to become an architect?
Well, my dad was an architect, and so early on I was interested in it, and I always loved drawing. Most kids do, but I was always drawing and pretty good at it. And I'd visit him at his office, and he was in the 50s and 60s. Of course, he was into mid-century modern, which currently is all the rage. We lived in Puerto Rico for 9 years when I was growing up because he wanted to study concrete structure, which I was born in Connecticut, and he went to Yale, but mostly wood structures and wood and steel in Connecticut, and concrete more down. It was very popular in Miami and Puerto Rico and the tropics for its sturdiness in hurricanes, and it could take any form, poured in place concrete. So anyway, I got really interested in that through my dad, and and building his own house. I mean, he did it from scratch. He did most of the work himself and designed it all. And that was fascinating to me too, that he could actually do that, start to finish. So when it came to college, my choices were, one of my choices was go to Yale and study architecture, or go visit Utah in 1971 with a girlfriend's family and go skiing and discover Utah and its excellent architecture school. So I did choose Utah over Yale, and the rest is history.
Talk about the you at that time and then moving to Boston.
Yeah, so University of Utah was really excellent. I told my folks that as I skied 64 times, begged for a ski pass at Alta, which was $125 for a season ski pass, and definitely used it to the max. And but I did really enjoy school there. I majored in fine arts and sculpture in particular, while taking the basic design courses over at the architecture side of the building. But I always went back in summertime to Chicago, north of Chicago. We had moved to the suburbs of Chicago. So my dad in '68, where my dad worked for Abbott Laboratories as their corporate architect. So now I've kind of had an insight into, through him, into international architecture and design and working worldwide, basically. He traveled the world on those projects. But I was happy that our architecture school, I actually took a brief respite and studied at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee for my junior year, partly because I couldn't get the courses I needed at the University of Utah at one point to finish up, and so I got frustrated and went back to Milwaukee, and that was a good experience. It was a different approach, of course, than the University of Utah somehow, and really made some great friends, lifelong friends, and the staff was excellent. Learned a lot. So when I came back to Utah to finish my senior year, I took a heavy load, but I wanted to finish that year because I had just gotten married. But I always loved that idea of starting from scratch and developing a program or understanding a program, and going through various design scenarios, different solutions to arrive at what was arguably the perfect or the best solution for the budget, for the program, for the environment. I applied to Harvard because my wife at the time was accepted at Harvard to go to the education program, and I didn't get into Harvard. I guess I did too much skiing, but I had pretty good grades, just not not the top of the tier like Harvard was looking for. Anyway, applied to the Boston Architecture Center, which was a really good choice actually. It was very real. It was right in town. It was very exciting, and a lot of activities going on. All the courses were taught by architects practicing in the area. So I learned a tremendous amount. And being in Boston with its amazing mix of historical architecture, and like Chicago too. I couldn't get work in Boston. It was one of those slump times. They definitely went through boom and bust years, and actually set off on an Amtrak pass for 3 weeks to look at all these different places we could live, and it was a tour of the West basically with all the major cities, and visiting friends and staying with friends in those various places looking for opportunities. And the second stop after Denver was from Chicago was Salt Lake. And at the time, my wife had gotten an offer of a job in Salt Lake, and we had friends there that we could stay with and, get started, get our feet on the ground. And so this was in 78. And I got a job over at Holland Pasker, Brunjes at the time. So we moved to Utah, back to Utah with two young boys, bought a house and off and running. Holland Pasker, Brunjes was we used to kind of refer to it as a sweatshop, but it was draftspeople all lined up in a big room, drafting room, and Cecil Holland would walk around with his pipe in his mouth and roughly tell us, what get back to work, that kind of thing. He was great. I love Cecil, and Art Pasker was very good at marketing and very connected to the church, he just knew a lot of people in town. But yeah, definitely a lot of detail work and production, how to produce a set of drawings and organize it and work with consultants. I learned there. And at one point I was lent out to Ron Mullen. He had two big jobs in Park City. And Ron Mullen was very busy with Shadow Ridge and Park. Anyway, some big hotel, condo type projects at the time in Park City. So I started working there and just on loan and really enjoyed it. It was a totally different experience, kind of being involved more in design and the aesthetics and the feeling environment of a building, not just space, but more useful and functional, not functional, but architectural space, architectural office, more than just drafting service. We were kind of in very small little spaces all together, so there a lot of camaraderie and talking back and forth and sharing information, experience, and that kind of thing. So at Mullen Associates, Bob Money, who sat behind me, had just passed his exam. At one point, all in one sitting, he had passed all 9 sections at the time. And that was of real interest to me. I had been doing my sculptural work and selling pretty well. Went to attended the Park City Arts Festival and the Utah Arts Festival, and had some shows at some galleries in Park City and in town, Salt Lake City. But I hadn't really considered staying or becoming an architect. But it was probably a good time. So in '83, I studied hard for probably 6 months and maybe 8 months, and got up to speed on all the requirements for HVAC and structural, and asked a lot of questions of mentors and that kind of thing, and to be ready for the exams. And in '83, took the exams and was able to get them all done at one sitting, which was wonderful. It was pretty intense. And I remember Bob Liss walking around the design studio during the design section and offering encouragement, I guess you could call it, to all of us there. But that was a fun, exciting time. And I remember having to be basically walked home out of the exam area after that design day by my wife and taken to dinner. And I couldn't even figure out what to order for dinner. She had to help me choose. So yeah, I became licensed as an architect, and my first convention in San Francisco as an AIA member, I remember signing up for the various courses and seminars and conferences, and one of them was named something about becoming or considering becoming a partner. And it had never occurred to me before, but I went to this thing, and all these young guys were talking about becoming a partner in a firm was what you had to do. That was the goal of being an architect, and that's what you basically planned your career around, was becoming a partner. And that was news to me, but I took it to heart and basically said in '84, that in 5 years, I set myself a goal to become a partner somewhere. And that wasn't going to happen at Ron Mullins because he was pretty much sole proprietor and did all the design and held things pretty close to the vest. But so I started looking around town and did interview with Gillis Stransky and the up and coming firms at the time, Thomas Peterson Hammonds, and I couldn't get into Valentiners. I knew I had met Niels while I was going to school in Utah, and I saw what his firm was doing, and a friend had gone over there to run a CAD station with Brent Tibbetts at the time. And so I was very interested, but I couldn't get an appointment with him. And I realized later that it was the office manager had this had that reputation for controlling his time and his appointments to the detriment of the firm, actually. So anyway, I called Niels at home at one point, really wanted to talk to him because of what my friend was saying. And he was very understanding and encouraging. And we met soon thereafter, and I was so I started in '85, and immediately was given some like a project to manage by myself, and that was super exciting. And I taken projects all the way through at Mullen, but this was basically meet with a client, find out what needed to be done, get it done. I grew pretty quickly at Valentiner Jones, and took on a big client fairly early. FHP Medical Healthcare was an insurance-based program, and they were expanding quite a bit. And Niels knew the guy in charge of facilities development, so I took that on, and we did a bunch of clinics around the area, up in Ogden, down in Provo, in Salt Lake City. All these were new clinics. And that was fascinating to me to master plan a completely new site with the anticipation of these buildings. That took a lot of vision, but it was exciting. And then ended up doing a big hospital and a specialty center down in South Salt Lake for them, which later became Granite High School, that our firm remodeled into educational building. So that was pretty fun to see that come around. But I stayed very busy with medical, and other clients came to us too during that time. And at one point was meeting with Niels and at the Boyer Company late at night, and or late in the evening. And he turned to me. We finished the meeting. He turned to me and said, I'm looking at reorganizing the firm, and I'd really like you and Sean Onion to join me and become a partner at VCBO. This was 1989, and I, what could I say? I was very, very thrilled and excited, and told him absolutely. I'd be glad to bring everything I had to the growth of the firm, and soon thereafter, he asked, what would you think about hiring Steve Crane, or bringing Steve Crane on as another partner with Sean and I. And I learned, I didn't know Steve, but I learned about him, and that sounded well-rounded. He brought a lot of education and marketing experience to the firm. So we all got together, and in 1990 became VCBO.
How did your personal specialties become developed?
So I took to the complexity of that project, and over the years, pursued that kind of work at the state, at the university, with Intermountain Healthcare, with other, physician groups, that kind of thing in the area. And at one point, trying to think exactly the years, but healthcare kind of was really in trouble because it was changing. I remember sitting in on an AIA conference where the clients, or the hospital administrators were presenting their side of the story, and it was the economy, of course, was hurting healthcare at the time, and they didn't know, they had no strategy as to where to grow or how to grow. And I remember them saying, that it was very difficult, of course, to build anything without a strategic plan in place, because they couldn't see the future. So I took at that point when healthcare was faltering, and big healthcare architectural firms around the country were going into other, their teams were working on other kinds of projects. A big one was correctional work. The complexity and the flow and that kind of thing were similar and applicable from healthcare to correctional work. So I got involved with that quite a bit, mostly in youth detention centers around the state, and we did some major projects. Started with Farmington out there, and where it went near the fairgrounds. There was nothing there when we did that project either, and worked on a very modular plan. I got involved with modularity back with FHP in healthcare, and it really applied to correctional work too, working on modules of 16 cells and that kind of thing, and then around a day room. So a lot of similarities there, but the designs had to be very functional and everything visible, like in a hospital. So I really enjoyed that work, and I think contributed quite a bit, hopefully, to a number of younger kids, finding their way in life through a better facility that felt comfortable and not and encouraged them to be better people instead of punishing them.
What can you tell me about Happy's Temple, Peter?
Fred Thalman at the office got us involved with Coca-Cola's Park City sculpture snow sculpture contest, and we got a group of us together. I don't know, maybe 12 to 20 of us with our kids and families on a Saturday, and go up to Park City and build a huge pile of snow out by the high school, and then sculpt it. And generally, I was in charge of the design and making it feasible, fun, recognizable, that kind of thing for the crowds of people that would come through, and also as a competition to try to win, the prize money, which we always gave away to, I forget what it was, but some child's, I think books for children, as I recall. And, but yeah, we kept winning it year after year. And one of our best ones was Happy's Temple. And there was one of the dwarves, 7 dwarves, and this was Happy, and he was in his temple. And so we got to do the architecture of the temple, kind of classical pillars, like the Parthenon. Anyway, that was great, and we won, and $1,000 went to the kids, and we kept winning. But later that year, I think we were submitting work to the AIA competition for the year, for projects. And I just thought, well, this is an important project. We did the program, we created it and built it, design build. And I wrote up a little blurb on it, very tongue in cheek, but very serious language describing this project and the metaphors behind this symbolism. And it won. It got an honorable mention award from the AIA that year, which I thought was wonderful.
How about some of the other projects that you're particularly proud of?
My favorite early on in the early 2000s was HSEB, Health Sciences Education Building up at the University of Utah, which we designed. We collaborated with a firm out of Boston, and won the commission for that through DFCM. And it was a wonderfully complex and comprehensive project from the beginning. And besides which, we worked with so many departments up at the University Health Center, Health Sciences campus. DFCM, a great project manager to work with, and the complexity and the solutions of the project were just fantastic, wonderful to figure out. It was my first indication that I needed to work with an entire envelope. I went into the project knowing we couldn't provide the University of Utah and the hospital with a building that wasn't state of the art and super tight in the envelope of the building. So we studied that in great detail, and I know we provided them with an excellent skin of the building that will last years and years. But also, that was our first project where we actually followed through with a LEED certification, and it was the university's first project where we pursued a LEED Gold certification, and achieved that through design and bringing the contractor on board, leading the client through that process and making the choices. Some based on how much it would cost, but others based on what was right for the future and for the environment. It was a real milestone in my career. Working with an out-of-state firm too. One of my favorite stories was one of the architects from Boston. We were in charge of writing all the specifications, of course. And he said, now what have you chosen for the front door handle? And I showed him, and he said, well, that's good, but that's the first piece of the building. The users will touch when they come to the building. So we really want to make it nice and tactile. And so we chose something even nicer in stainless steel. And I just remember that, that attention to detail. What's the building really going to feel like from the very first moment somebody opens that door? That's important. So that was very fun. And in addition, by the way, we commissioned artwork through the arts program, the Arts Council, and selected 3 different artists to provide artwork throughout the building. And that was wonderful to work with those folks. Of course, most of these projects were CMGC, construction management, and general contractors. So you had the contractor on board very early in the project, which was wonderful. And to rely on them and have these discussions about how to make this connection work, or their subcontractors, how to make the connection between the building and the library work, and be weatherproof and functional. That was, we went into lots of detail with the glass subcontractor, and learned a lot that way too. And watching them take on the lead requirements for their part of the project, for no food, no drink, no smoking on campus, really changed their culture. If you can imagine a building site with no big golf cups around, that was amazing. The entire paradigm changed basically for contractors during this project, and it was wonderful to see that take place and to see them really get on board with it.
Speaking of which, why don't you talk about changes in the industry from the time you began in the 70s through your ultimate retirement?
Yeah, it wasn't like my grandparents, the changes in the construction industry, but they were substantial. And I think I've already touched on one of them was that was attractive to me at Neil's office back in the 80s, mid 80s, was CAD. And I had become a very good draftsperson at Mullen Associates, and could get around the desk and the drawing tools really quickly and develop plans. But it was the day, it was the era of CAD just starting at that point. And that changed because, offices and skill sets a great deal over the next decades. And of course, CAD became, and so Neil's was really at the forefront of that with Brent Tippett's as the operator. And of course, it started with just floor plans, things that could be repeated or, over different floors, you just copy those. But then it became, the whole set, of course, it was on CAD, and so useful. Then when the evolution came to Revit, that was another whole change of design. Basically, you could design everything in 3 dimensions, and much more powerful than CAD itself, and fascinating and wonderful for the client to see his project develop in 3 dimensions. And of course, along with that was SketchUp and Rhino, other different program software that enabled us to sketch buildings in 3 dimensions. Another big change, I think, was envelope design, which went from go framing, put a skin on the front, on the inside, and a skin on the outside, and then a weatherproof material in front of that. It went from that to a very engineered approach for all the seams and joints and corners and roof and parapets down at the base of the wall, and taking into consideration condensation and the building needing to breathe but still be weatherproof. So that I think was a big change, where the envelope became an engineered system of all the various components. And then in sustainable design, huge revolution in architecture and design, and hopefully helping the planet, save a bunch of energy. And until LEED came on, I was following the sustainability, and I think we were doing buildings generally that would pass, a silver certification generally over the years. But yeah, when it came to LEED and that came out, I took the exam on that after a year or two after it came out, and became really fascinated by that whole process of transforming, recycle, reuse, and efficiencies in design for materials and where they're sourced from. So that became really our holy grail over the next few years to, and also to get clients on board with that. At first, it was a real struggle to, to have them spend, like developers, have them spend money on various components of the building, or LED lighting, or more, glazing, the different things that would cost more but pay off in the long run. It was hard for them to swallow that pill for a while, but it didn't take long before even developers were saying, you know what, if I spend this much more on this building, I can get this much more for rents, and I'll be the first place people go to for leases, because it was becoming attractive, of course, for employers to be officed in healthy environments, or environments too that would increase efficiency and user satisfaction and comfort.
Talk to me a little bit about any disappointments you might have had.
So partnership was this bright goal when I was just a young architect, and it turned out very nicely. And I met my goals, exceeded my goals. I thought because we were growing, we were young, we all got along well. But like with any firm, I think you're dealing with egos. I mean, architectural egos, and but you're also dealing with different types of personalities. Maybe it's growing pains. I'm sure it was a lot of that, where it was just a lot to manage, and I know tempers would run thin, or opinions would run really hot, and that was disappointing in a sense that we couldn't just learn to get along. But it was a business, so and it was seriously run as a business, which I really respect Niels for. Many things, of course. I'm very grateful to Niels over the years. But one was his business sense and running the business. But you getting along as partners, you're basically married to each other. You have to respect each other, and you're often running your own, little kingdom a lot on your own, of course, chasing work, and of course with the full support of the other partners and the resources of the office. But you sometimes step on each other's toes, or do something somebody doesn't agree with, or something happens with the project. I think generally we worked everything out in a good fashion, and there were compromises made, that kind of thing, for the very many decisions that had to be made constantly in running a big office. Hopefully that showed to the employees, to the clients, where we were solid, could be depended upon.
Advice to somebody starting out in the field.
Really get into the culture of where you're working, and try to help it out. Try to do everything you can to contribute positively to the feeling of an office. You're there, almost more hours than you are with your family, so it becomes a second family, and it's important to treat it like that. Help out. If you see, this has been very important, I think, for me. If you see a void, somewhere where something's not being taken care of, and it started with changing the ammonia on the blueprint machine back in the day. If it needed doing, go do it, and you become a little bit less dispensable and more important. If the firm needs some master planning and you can do that, you're good at it, or you feel you could take a stab at it, do it. it's taking those chances, kind of, we used to call it giving people enough rope to hang themselves by. So always look for the opportunity to mentor, to empower, to help people grow in their career, and don't ever go backwards and put somebody down or punish anybody, for doing something wrong. Just learn from your mistakes and empower people to move forward and grow.
Any last thoughts for us, Peter?
I had a wonderful career with marvelous people. I loved working with so many different types of people, the contractors and consultants and clients, always challenging me, and every day was different, which I love about architecture. And you get out of it what you put into it. There's no magic formula, just hard work and diligence and creativity, always looking out for the best solution.